they say that from 1 million to 3 million is the hardest growth like tranche in the journey. It's going back to that idea that 86% of small businesses are solopreneurs. How many of them report that they use technology or specialized software? The number is 38%. 38% of small businesses are using specialized software. And when I look at that number, I say, not even half of them are using technology to scale. So how do you expect any of them to get past the $1 million mark? How do you expect them to get to 3? There are a lot of 7-figure businesses out there. Are they $1 million machines? Hell no. They are a dumpster fire that's strung together with a bunch of Google Sheets and masking tape and ad hoc tools and lots of burnout and just anxiety that's literally about to pop at any moment. And it's at that critical phase where you either make it to the next level or you become part of the 90% of businesses that fail.
You're listening to the B2B Revenue Executive Experience, a podcast dedicated to helping executives train their sales and marketing teams to optimize growth. Whether you're looking for techniques and strategies or tools and resources, you've come to the right place. Let's accelerate your growth in 3, 2, 1.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the B2B Revenue Executive Experience. I'm your host, Cory, and today I have with me Ernesto Mandowski. He is a multifaceted entrepreneur, author, and business consultant, known for his expertise in transforming businesses into momentum-driven machines. He founded the $1 Million Machine, a platform designed to assist service providers in enhancing their operational systems. Now, Ernesto's personal mission is to democratize access to business operational resources. That's going to make it a whole lot easier for entrepreneurs to navigate the complexities of scaling their businesses. He aims to transform chaos into cash flow by providing actionable strategies that empower business leaders to achieve sustainable growth. Ernesto, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Cory. Happy to be here.
Yeah, I'm excited to get into this a lot more because, traditionally we do a lot of mid-size enterprise stuff, but we've also been working with more entrepreneurs recently. So I'm really excited to get your take on that.
Happy to share my insight.
Okay.
Valuable insights.
Yes, of course, valuable insights only. It's in the fine print of the contract if you look real close. But first, let's kind of go back and help the audience get to know you a little bit. What's your journey been like? How did you arrive where you are today?
Well, I was super passionate about getting into the restaurant space and applying technology there because 15 years ago, there was nothing. It was pen and paper, it was Micros, it was Aloha. These are like two of the industry giants. And I knew there was a wave of innovation coming. And I kept telling people, hey, I want to get into restaurants. And my parents were like, you're crazy. The engineers, my classmates, said, we don't work with restaurants. And the restaurant people said, technology, we're pen and paper people. Like, the chef, tell me to go clear the tables. Slowly but surely, I was very committed to my mission. And after 10 years, I led the turnaround of a $100 million family-owned steakhouse chain and became a restaurant analyst, the acquirer of that business. And once I kind of realized my dream, I said, okay, I have a new dream. That new dream is to help more small businesses actually harness the power of technology.
Wow, that's quite the story. How did you get your foot in the door? Because you mentioned there was a little bit of resistance from both sides, right?
I enrolled in culinary school in a business program. And every week I would bring my bread that I would bake. And people would be like, oh, wow, he bakes bread. Like he actually is doing something with it. And that was like my lead magnet. So I'd get their attention. And then they're like, so what are you up to? And then I would share what I really wanted to do, which was implement and integrate technology in restaurants. And at the time, people had nothing for me. It was like the proverbial no that you get in a sales conversation. But through ongoing follow-up and checking in periodically, 6 months after the program finished, one of those instructors said, hey, we're opening up a new food group in New York City in Grand Central Station. We need a technology person. Like we had 8 businesses and we're all pen and paper and our new boss wants someone to implement technology. So might be worth the talk.
Okay, nice. I love the idea of bread as a lead gen magnet. I think that's something that B2B sales reps listening out there, take note, dust off that sourdough starter from 2020, and that's that's the way to get into it.
It's nothing new, really. I mean, a lot of sales campaigns, right? To book the meeting and get that first call, it's like, all right, send a lumpy package, like send a compass and then
Yep.
send a calculator and then send a whatever. Like I happen to send bread, not before the call, but after a client. Actually, when a client joins my membership and pays in full for the year, I do have a question on the intake form around what are your carb dreams made of? And when they answer that, I literally manifest it. I actualize it in the form of a loaf of challah bread and send it to them. They're floored. They're absolutely floored.
Yeah, that's fantastic. That's an awesome onboarding touch. Okay. We're talking bread, and there's another intriguing moment I want to ask you about because I saw on your LinkedIn profile that you say that you discovered your life's work after writing a book about bees. I'm highly intrigued. Tell me more.
So after that process of learning technology and understanding how everything worked was really painful. No one guided me. Everyone said I was crazy, the nose, it's not possible. But I stuck to reading the help centers, like the documentation centers, submitting support tickets, like really understanding and gathering all these bits and pieces from my research. It's no different than a bee. When they go to gather nectar, they go to different flowers and they extract the pollen, they pollinate the flowers. And so we are doing that as humans as we go from job to job or experience to experience or podcast host to podcast host. We're kind of sharing these insights, all the while going back to our hive, which is our kind of our home place, like our value prop, right? My value prop at the time was restaurants, systems engineering, tech, and change management. Now it's small business, it's change management, it's training materials, and I offer that honey to the world. That honey sometimes is a product, sometimes it's a service, it's an experience, and that honey is really it's the vehicle to creating a transformation for others. It's what some people would call like your offer, like your core offer. So that book that I wrote kind of shared this story of how I made this transition. It was kind of like a memoir, but it was just a memoir. It doesn't teach you how to make your honey. It was just kind of like my story. After launching the book, though, when I created my company is focused on helping you find that unique transformation and then building a business around that transformation.
Got it. Okay. That really does align really well, that analogy, once you explain it and lay it out. That's kind of fascinating.
Thank you. Fortunately, unfortunately, here we are in a podcast. It's a nice informal conversation. You get it. It's nice to hear. But when you're in a high stakes sales conversation, it's like, pay me $10,000 to build your hive. People are like, what? I don't care about honey. Like bottom line profits. And which actually led me to rebranding my company to $1 Million Machine last year because people don't care about honey. Oh, entrepreneurs don't care about honey or bees or pollination. They care about $1 Million Machine.
Right. I could see where there'd be a little bit of audience mismatch, especially during a sales call where attention spans are running short. But I don't know. I'm a supporter, if nothing else.
Thanks, Cory. It means a
You're
lot.
welcome. So, kind of going back to the restaurant theme here, your approach to business ops has really built around what you call a 5 recipe framework. Could you explain that to a little bit more and kind of walk us through the genesis of that?
My story, as you've heard, is very much inspired by restaurants. And so I believe every business has 5 recipes to go from pop-up pilot, which is your side hustle, all the way to Michelin starred, Michelin designed masterpiece. So to go from that $0 to $10 million journey, you are implementing these 5 recipes, which start with, as I mentioned, your transformation. What is that original offer that you are sharing with the world to create a transformation? Once you have mastery over that offer, you then move to the second recipe, which is connection, which your B2B revenue experience, it's sales, it's understanding, okay, how do we now systematize relationship building so that we can predictably enroll 5 or 10 or 20 new clients to go through the transformation? The third recipe is communication. After you've gone through the Rolodex of the network and everyone you know in your ecosystem, it's now time to reach new markets. You are a marketer. You, Cory, are right now in creating the communication through a podcast to reach new audiences, to attract new people who want to get into connection, who want to create a transformation. So you start to seeing these 3 recipes are building on top of each other. And most entrepreneurs, they get it. Like they get these 3 recipes. They're posting on IG, they're selling, they're sending a contract, they're doing some version of a fulfillment. Are they doing it well? It's probably a topic for another time. But what keeps them from taking things to the next level is recipe number 4, which is organization. And so when you create teams in your business with tactics and processes and playbooks and how you do things, and then you integrate technology to start automating these processes, you now have some version of a business. You have an organization that is scaling, it's actually possible to scale because you have rhythms. And most entrepreneurs, 86% of the small businesses out in America are not organizations, they're actually solopreneurs. So they are literally, by definition, one-man show. They don't have teams. Or they're a one-man show, or one-person show, but they're doing all the things of the teams. So they never get to that point. And the last recipe, once we do build out the organization, is actualization. It's when you bring in additional people to help you. You actually help them see their personal mission and vision manifested inside of the companies. When you can design that, you really can create unstoppable performance from these people who want to do great work every single day.
That makes a lot of sense, especially the roadblock at step 4. I feel like I've seen that play out a lot. And even making the jump to step 4 is one thing. And also, as you mentioned, the majority of small businesses are actually solopreneurs out there. I've seen a lot of entrepreneurs and solopreneurs kind of struggle making that leap from 3 to 4 because it requires letting go at a certain sense, right? And, I was thinking more about the restaurant analogy. And originally when I read this, and started doing research for this podcast, I saw how close they were aligned, but the first thing that pinged in the back of my brain was, okay, some people have said some choice things to me in the corporate world, but no one's thrown a chair. And I can't say the same for my time in restaurants, So how does leadership factor in? Is my big question. That's where I'm going with this.
I shared actualization as the 5th recipe, right? People think like, oh, when I have the organization, when I have the teams of people, then I'll do the culture stuff. But in a sense, it starts with, and people are like, oh, like mission, vision, and values. Like they don't never define that. But I, as an individual, as a human, as an individual contributor, must create my own mission, vision, and values. And what most leaders are not doing is that they're not actually, or maybe they are, but it's like on the wall somewhere, but they're not living those values. And because they're not living those values, no one on their team is listening to them. People are saying things like, oh, we got to be customer centric. Like they're spewing this from their ivory tower. But then you look at their project management system and they have like 100 overdue tasks. So it's like, how can we be customer centric if literally table 19 is waiting for their steak for an hour? And I don't mean that literally, I mean that metaphorically, right? You had a client, you're a web agency, and you have a client that paid you $15,000 to build their website, and it's been 3 weeks and you haven't provided an update. So how can other people listen to you if you, the leader, are not going to be the values?
I think that factors in as a huge problem. And I'm fascinated to get your take on this, Ernesto. Do you think that culture develops whether or not you define it?
Absolutely. I don't know you, but I promise you, Cory, you have some baggage from your life. Like we have all gone through some stuff, and that's the culture that's happening inside of a company. It's up to us to be proactive, recognizing, either the good, the bad, and reshaping and reframing it to how we want it to be.
No, I totally agree. And okay, so let's look at an example of people that are doing it well. So we'll throw out my example of the chair throwing chef, and we'll usher in an example where there's a really top performing restaurant where, that hypothetical table is not waiting an hour and a half for their steak, right? It is perfectly cooked. It is coming out on time. What can we do with that in the business world? Like what can we take away from those restaurants operating in that manner?
With what respect? With the fact that the steak is coming out on time?
Yeah, I would say.
I think it comes down to integrity, and integrity in the sense that you go to a restaurant, you pay $300 per person, prefix meal, it's flawless. Right? If someone's coming to you for whatever it is that you offer, you have the integrity to say, hey, this process is going to take, 3 months, 2 weeks, a month, whatever it's going to be, but then actually be that commitment. I think because people are moving so fast and they're trying to do so much more and organizations are demanding more from people. Like people aren't taking the time to do the lessons learned. They're not taking the time to delivery isn't going back to sales to like re-communicate back the new expectations of like how long something realistically takes. And part of the reason, you get this blame game across teams, there must be one person who's kind of like the, not arbitrator, but like the mediator and ensuring everything is running with the integrity that we say it is. And there are not enough people that are doing that in the world. And that's, going back to my intro, kind of what I'm interested in helping create.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I like that approach. And it's got me wondering, when we talked about leadership, successes and failures, and also the issue of culture coming into it, if we do get set up and we reach that level 4, level 5, I'm just thinking that if you're on a small team, everyone's got to pull their weight, right? And so even if you're living that culture, even if you're embodying that, how can leaders of small teams resist the urge to micromanage? Or how do they find that line when everyone's responsibilities are so key?
One, definitely trust. You got to trust your team. Trust but verify. I mean, no, trust but verify. A big problem right now is I don't know your company, how you are doing things, but you got Slack, you got WhatsApp, you got emails, you got text messages, you got phone calls, you have weekly status meetings, you have monthly status meetings, you have water cooler conversation. I mean, there's just so much garbage being sent out across all of these channels. It's so hard for anyone to trust anyone because like the noise is just killing you. If you get super clear on, hey, everyone, we will only email for this reason. We will only Slack, like memes only on Slack, right? Or GIFs. Project updates only in Notion, only. Unless there's a burning bridge, we pick up the phone and figure it out. Like getting super clear on these internal communication policies is what is going to move the needle forward. But we're doing so many things. We're doing so much.
Yeah, I think that really is a problem in a few different ways, right? You have the problem of being constantly busy and then kind of being bombarded by all these different channels. And if you're lucky, you'll remember where that piece of information is for this project. Go here, go that. And then at the same time, you can't help but wonder how much of it is impacted by not really understanding what the other team is doing in terms of, like you said, if I'm throwing something over to sales and not really setting expectations that, hey, from a customer service or implementation perspective, this is going to take 2.5 weeks to set up. It can't be done in a week and a half. I don't care what you put in the contract. How can you work out and kind of account for those blind spots and help people work better and collaborate?
Well, it goes back to the culture, goes back to the actualization. It goes back to creating a core value of authentic communication. Because I think people in the work, and this is why I don't focus too much on larger businesses. I kind of, my zone of genius is up to 20 people. But when you are in these large organizations and there's budget cuts and there's quiet quitting and there's P&Ls and there's numbers and there's just this sense of fear and anxiety that is invisible and is sabotaging the organization. So I think a leader can recognize what's actually happening, even read through the employee surveys that are filled with crap and actually tell people, hey, like it's okay to communicate something like that. It's okay to tell sales that, this is it. But again, I don't think people are doing that. I think there's just a lot of fear and anxiety inside of larger organizations.
Okay, well, yeah, let's keep it small. So we'll say like a 20 and under company, and looking at that. So if I'm a leader and I start to see maybe I have a small team and they're doing too much, right? They're fragmented, messaging is breaking down, even though we have a good culture of trust, what steps would you recommend us taking to empower them with processes, software? Where should we start?
I think people need to be on a shared project management tool. I happen to be a Notion savage wizard. Whether it's Notion, whether it's Asana, it doesn't matter the tool, but it matters that you're all on the same place and you're all able to see the same information and that you all understand what does an escalation process look like when it comes to issue tracking and risk management. I don't know if people actually define what that looks like, but maybe it's one step or one bullet in your weekly meeting. It's like, hey, are there any issues or risks that we have not meeting our priorities or not making a client deliverable based on a contract. Like, what is that? And just have it be part of a regular step in the weekly planning meeting to talk through. Eventually, you solve the problems, new problems will come up, but you do solve and move forward.
I think that's great advice. It's the same kind of thing that we talk about with larger teams and going back and forth between, this time I'll put the heat on marketing, right? If marketing's throwing a bunch of unqualified leads over to sales and, or there's a lot of churn 9 months from now, even if they can close a deal, right, from these leads that aren't that tremendous, having a system of record, having software that works within those CRM tools where everyone can kind of stay on the same page and see like what are the blockers here, like what is actually happening from the customer perspective. I think it's really invaluable.
Absolutely.
Okay, you've also spoken about the importance of making minor changes to drive major growth. And I think that's going to be something that is universally applicable and liked by everyone, from entrepreneurs up to people running large teams. Can you tell me more about that?
Yeah, I believe in a daily tinkering practice, tinkering with the sense of experimenting, of looking at my processes, 10-minute tinkering. I mean, I literally put a timer on my phone, and for 10 minutes, I'll think about a recent problem that I've had and go ahead and solve it. So like right now, I'm onboarding a VA, or I have been onboarding a VA in my company. He started 3 weeks ago. And my goal for him is to productize our entire blog publication process. And so every single day that he has been on, I have taken ownership over helping him actually complete that goal. I think most entrepreneurs, like, they hire a VA expecting them to figure it out. But no, like we as individuals need to make continuous minor improvements so that we can create these major growth opportunities in our business. Since he's been with us, I now have the next 8 weeks of my blog posts scheduled. I'm about 50% done with the copy. And he's already been trained on how do I actually take the article, put on the website, create the LinkedIn post, create the carousel, create all these different things. None of that would have happened if I didn't take my daily 10-minute tinkering practice over the last 3 weeks.
That seems very efficient.
It's fun.
And you mentioned ownership, and I feel like some people might think of ownership in a different way, right? Like you said, the entrepreneur that hires the VA and is like, no, that's your stuff. You figured that out. That's the task you own, blah, blah, blah. That seems like a mistake. What do you mean when you say ownership?
Well, I say that every owner is in the way of growth, not like metaphysically I'm not taking responsibility, which is the example I think you just described, but we are physically in the way. I had a goal of launching 13 blog posts. When I was doing the process, it was taking me 10 hours per blog post from start to finish. So that was 10 times 13. That's 130 hours. That is literally 130 hours that are in the way of that priority. So when you think about an owner who is doing marketing, sales, customer experience, operations, and finance in a business, we're literally in the way of all of those things happening. And even now, like, my VA is like, hey, Ernesto, I need you to approve this. I need you to approve this. I'm in the way. I'm in the way of growth. And so continuously asking this question, what do I need to do to get out of the way, is what's going to open up this idea of, oh, I'll hire a VA, or, oh, I guess I could automate this, or, oh, we could simplify our offer so that Ernesto doesn't need to be in the offer, and it can actually be a contractor doing that offer. So really asking that question.
Yeah, I think that's a tremendous question to ask oneself as a leader in any situation, right? Either if you're an entrepreneur running a small team or a leader in a larger corporate function, because the thing with bottlenecks in decision-making processes is they always happen at the top, and especially if you're an entrepreneur, right, where you are the head of marketing, the head of sales, the head of customer success. Everything's got to run through you. And like you said, Ernesto, you are literally a roadblock, a big one, standing right there between people and their jobs.
And people get triggered, like owners get triggered when I'm like, oh, you're in the way. No, you're actually in the way. Like, get out of the way.
Yeah, no, I imagine it's a hard advice to swallow. How do you help people kind of navigate that mindset shift?
Wait until I tell them that they are sabotaging the product. I mean, that's another trigger but I do it. Like, I tell people very directly in the membership when they sign up and they choose to work with me and be in my space. I'm Gordon Ramsay. I'm telling you that your system is shit and you got to fix it up and clean it together, because that's what is going to lead to having a world-class restaurant where you're cooking and getting those steaks out on time. You have to be ruthlessly disciplined with your digital workspace.
All right. We were talking a little bit earlier, and you said that you just came out with a new book. So give me the highlights of the highlights. Tell me what that experience was like and, what you're most proud of.
Highlights of the highlights. Well, the book talks through the 5 recipes, and it helps you recognize how each of these lead to helping you build your $1 million machine. And I wrote the book in less than 2 months. It has the wisdom of everything I've learned over the last 15 years. But I think the takeaway here is people that are listening, entrepreneurs, companies, like they have a framework for how they do things. Most of the time it's unconscious, but the moment you make it conscious, you are now able to tell the story through different mediums and really enroll people into this new paradigm that you're creating. For me, it was the story of building business systems with the power of restaurants as a storytelling tool. And so maybe you're a lot more, maybe you're, I think in the world of digital services that we're all living in, it's so hard to get caught up in what does it mean to have a website that's a landing page that collects email? It's so hard to get in that. But if you use metaphors to explain to people things, it becomes a lot more palatable.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, especially if you're not familiar with I think it really comes down to articulating the why behind you want to do something, not just you have to have X, Y, or Z. I'm struck by the title of the book, $1 Million Machine, because I've seen a lot of, you mentioned digital service companies, right? A lot of small agencies, a lot of entrepreneurs really get stuck at that $1 million in revenue mark. They're trying to hit that, and they struggle with that for a few years, and either I feel like they break through or they start, kind of going back. Have you seen the same thing? And if so, how do you help clients kind of navigate that?
I mean, right around the $1 million mark is where you probably have 1 or 2 full-time employees and a handful of contractors that you're working with. You got a video editor, you have maybe a website person, you have a couple of fulfillment people, a bookkeeper. And they say that from 1 million to 3 million is the hardest growth tranche in the journey. It's going back to that idea that, I said 86% of small businesses are solopreneurs. Do you know, Cory, how many of them report that they use technology or
No.
specialized software? The number is 38%. 38% of small businesses are using specialized software. And when I look at that number, I say, not even half of them are using technology to scale. So how do you expect any of them to get past the $1 million mark? How do you expect them to get to 3? There are a lot of 7-figure businesses out there. Are they $1 million machines? Hell no. They are a dumpster fire that's strung together with a bunch of Google Sheets and masking tape and ad hoc tools and lots of burnout and just anxiety that's literally about to pop at any moment. And it's at that critical phase where you either make it to the next level or you become part of the 90% of businesses that fail.
That strikes me as very, very true. All right. So, Ernesto, as we kind of end the podcast here, move toward the final stages, there are a few questions that we ask all of our guests. And one of them is, if you could go back a few years and give career advice to your younger self, what would it be and why?
I would tell myself to just stay committed to your vision, whatever you're doing. Well, I mean, I was, but there were many times where I was not confident about this whole restaurant tech thing. And a lot of that insecurity held me back.
Yeah, I think that's great advice for everyone to hear. Cultivating a resilient mindset and just kind of staying focused on, hey, if you believe in it and you see a path, it's going to be hard, but going to stick to the path, so to speak. All right.
Exactly.
Final question for you is, we're recording this in February of 2025. Looking 5 years into the future, what's a big shift that's coming for us that we don't see right now?
AI is there. AI will be ubiquitous, but something people can focus on doing. I mean, yeah, sure, learn the tools, but just create personal mastery. Create mastery over who you want to be, how you want to be, and you will learn the tools to support that. Don't try to learn the tools without knowing who you want to be.
I love that. Yeah, I think that's really good advice for a lot of people that are getting into new fields or maybe people kind of switching careers. I feel like there's a lot of specialized software out there and for good reason. It does a lot of great things. And at the same time, I think people have a lot of anxiety around jumping into that and thinking, oh, that's what I have to get right versus, again, kind of focusing on the why behind that and what strengths of yours it's going to amplify and how it's going to make you more efficient. All right. Well, Ernesto, thank you so much for joining me. If people want to learn more about you, where should they go?
Just DM me on LinkedIn.
Fair enough. Easy.
Cool.
All right. All right. Well, thanks again.
Yeah. Thank you, Cory.
You've been listening to the B2B Revenue Executive Experience. To ensure that you never miss an episode, subscribe to the show in iTunes or your favorite podcast player. Thank you so much for listening. Until next time.